On your feet, go quickly with me to Psalms 51. Psalms 51. To God be the glory, to all of the preachers, all of the deacons, the ladies, the trustees of the church, all of you, my Father's children. Psalms 51. Psalms 51. When you found it, say amen. Amen. Verse 1 says, have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Verse number 2 says, wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin. Skip down to verse number 10. Says, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Amen. You may be seated. You'll help me today? Come on, turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, I'm glad you are here. Turn to the other neighbor and say, neighbor, although I'm glad you are here, it's not about you, but it's all about Jesus. I want to talk for a few minutes today about a clean heart. A clean heart. Let me jump right into it and tell you that Psalm 51, David's cry for a clean heart, was born out of Samuel, 2 Samuel chapter 11 and chapter 12. David cries to God for a clean heart because in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and chapter 12, it tells the story about David and his how can I say, his tripping, his deceitfulness, his wrong attitude, his covetousness. Can I tell you that in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and 2 Samuel chapter 12, David broke all of the 10 commandments all on one day in one walk. Have you ever known somebody to break all the 10 commandments at one time, all at one time? Well, David is a prime example. In chapter 11 of 2 Samuel, it talks about David, how he was one day standing out on the balcony of the kingdom, and there he sees in the courtyard taking a bath a beautiful woman by the name of Bathsheba. You got to be careful and you have to watch where your eyes go. Some of y'all are looking at me kind of strange. David and men are not the only ones whose eyes tend to wander. There are some of you women in this room and your eyes wander too. Y'all not going to say amen. I'll say amen for you. Amen lights. David said, God gave me these eyes for looking. And so David sees this beautiful woman by the name of Bathsheba. She was in the courtyard. She was taking a bath. And so David saw her, and it was not bad enough that he saw her, but he also wanted her. Good God Almighty. You've got to be careful what you see, because sometimes your eyes will want what it sees. David not only sees her, wants her, but then he tells somebody to go get her. Listen, it's bad enough that you sin, but don't bring other people into your sin. My best friend, my homeboy, his name is Marcus. We went to school together, grew up together, but we made an unconventional pact like other people would not make. We were homeboys, best friends, and usually best friend homeboys, they would say, man, whatever you into, I'm into. But we made this pact so that we can maintain our friendship and never fight with one another. Whatever you into, man, I don't want to know nothing about it. Because that's my homeboy, that's my best friend. We know each other, we know each other's wrong, we know each other's sin. And so we made a pact, Sister Smith, that said, man, I know you well enough to know that I don't want to be involved in whatever you're involved in. It's one thing to sin, but it's another thing to bring somebody else in on your sin. Somebody says, because you haven't read the story, somebody says, what's wrong with that? He sees a pretty young lady. She's out there taking a bath. It wasn't his fault she was out there in the wide open taking a bath. And it wasn't his fault that he just happened to be standing up there in the balcony. God did give him those eyes for looking. What's wrong with that? Well, she was married. David calls for her, has her to come up to his room, and I don't need to tell you what happened. We all got a good sanctified imagination. And you know what happened when they got into that room. Okay, just in case you don't know what happened. Let me explain it to you. Y'all forcing it out of me. I'm just dying to tell you that Bathsheba ends up pregnant. Bathsheba ends up pregnant now. And David, he was already wrong because he committed adultery. But now this woman is pregnant. And David, here's an egregious sin. Here's a gross sin that happens. David gets this woman pregnant. And David says, that ain't my baby. Y'all read the story. Read the story. David said, we're gonna tell her husband this is his baby. As a matter of fact, to conceal the crime, what David does, David says to his servant Joab, go and get Uriah. Tell Uriah to take a couple of days off and go spend time with his wife. We're gonna justify this thing. But here, Uriah was a warrior. Uriah was smarter than that. Uriah was a warrior. And he said, now I took a vow that I'm going to fight for my people. I ain't got time to go home and be with my wife. So David got word. And Uriah said, no, I ain't going to take a couple of days vacation. I'm not going to go home. And so he sends another message by Joab. He says to Joab, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get Uriah drunk. We're going to carry him home, put him in the bed, and that's what's going to happen. It still didn't work. Don't you know that when you try to deceive or be deceitful, when you try to trick, you end up being the one tricked? I got to tell you, Holy Ghost folks, y'all Bible reading, tongue talking Christians, y'all Bible talking Christians, I got to tell you, every now and then y'all can be deceitful. Y'all looking at me like y'all have never lied and never stole nothing. You ain't never looked at a man, looked at a woman. Y'all looking at me kind of strange. But whatever you into, I may not know it, but God knows your heart. Does not work. David had planned. And so David's final plan, he says, I have no other choice. What we're going to do is Uriah will end up dead. David, not only does he commit adultery, not only does he deceive a man, but David commits murder. And so we end up at Psalms 51. In Psalms 51, in verse number 1, David says, have mercy on me. Is there anybody in this room that needs the Lord to have mercy on you? Okay, I'm kind of quiet today. I'm the pastor of the church, but I need the Lord to have mercy on me. And so when I go to bed at night, I say, Lord, show me a little bit of mercy, please. Because I know I done did some stuff that I shouldn't have been doing. Lord, have mercy on me. Then he says, and you get to the end of verse 1, he says, to blot out my transgressions. Now notice David's choice of words. He's going to use three they're small words, but they have big implications. He says, blot out my transgressions. You may not know what a transgression is, but transgression is a form of sin. Transgression, number 1, means that you violated a law. Number 2 means you violated a commandment. Number 3 means that you violated a moral law. David said, I broke one of your commandments. I slept with somebody else's wife. That's a moral law, a moral commandment that David broke. So he says to him, blot out my transgression. Now he uses the word blot. Blot means to just kind of dab it a little bit. Make it go away. You know how when your child will come in the house after they've been playing and they got a little few scrapes and bruises, nothing to really get upset about, but they got a few scrapes and bruises. They come into the house to get a glass of water, and you say, what had happened to you? Oh, I got a little owie, what my kids call an owie or a boo-boo. They say, Daddy, I got a boo-boo. And Camille say, Daddy, will you kiss it for me? And so when I kiss it, that means I kind of blotted it out. I just kind of made it feel better so I can get through the moment. Then watch this in verse number 2. In verse number 2, David switches gears. He does not say, blot out my transgressions, but David says, wash thoroughly mine iniquity. Now, iniquity is a word that's a little bit stronger than transgression. Transgression is something you can just kind of blot out, put a band-aid over, and kind of get me through the moment. But iniquity is something a little bit bigger than that. Iniquity is a gross injustice or a very gross sin. That's that kind of sin that makes you say, man, I would have did that. I don't know why you did that. I can't hang around you, but you deserve to be punished for that. Iniquity is that kind of thing that's deep down within you that you know you done messed up, and you messed up so bad you can't even live with yourself. Iniquity is that kind of sin when you try to go to sleep at night, you sitting there tossing and turning, trying to figure out how I'm going to make this thing right because it's so deep within you, it's just whooping you from the inside out. So David said, Lord, you can't block this thing out. David, I need to wash it. He says, Lord, I need you to wash me thoroughly. Anybody in this room need to be washed thoroughly? Come on now. I'm looking at 3 or 4 y'all looking down at y'all paper. Y'all giving yourself away. You need to be washed thoroughly. I'm talking about, Lord, wash me not with that dove. No, I don't need you to wash me with that secret, that guy. Y'all know what soap y'all use. Y'all need some, Sister Rose just said it. Grandma said, go boy, go get some of that lime. Get some Clorox, some bleach. We're going to make this thing go away. I came home so dirty one time, my mom, boy, you stand at the door. She said, first of all, you need to be washed down with a hose. Because she didn't want me to come in and mess up her clean floor. There's some stuff we done so bad Then he gonna get that lye soap. That lye soap is that tough soap. Some of us, if you're not used to lie, some of us need to be watching some SOS pads. And I know some of y'all hate when God gives you a bath, but it's needed. But I used to hate when I would go to take a bath. I was a little boy, got to tell off on myself. I'd go to take a bath, and it was something about Mama. Mama know exactly, without even looking in the tub, Mama know exactly how much water you can put in the tub. That water would be running. That water be running, and you could hear it through the pipe. We had one of those old houses, you could hear the water shout. And Mama would be watching the news. She said, turn that water back on. Then you get in the tub, you do a few bird blast, you know. Then you get out. And she said, don't make me come wash you. Now, as a boy, I'd be offended when my mama had to come wash me. And she said, I said, Mama, this is embarrassing. She said, you ought to be embarrassed. Because Mama she would do that test to see if you really wash yourself. You know, the test you give your kids where you get on the wrist and you kind of rub in the wrist. And then you get a roll up on that wrist. See, I ain't going to one minute. Y'all know. She rubbed the back of your neck. And if you get some dirt roll up, and then she thump. Business getting out of that tub. And then she washed it. But it was something about the way Mama washed it. She'd be rough. She said, be still, I'm trying to get the dirt off of it. But after she was done, not only did you smell clean, not only did you look clean, but you felt clean to yourself. David says, wash me thoroughly. Because when God washes you, not only do you look clean, not only do you smell clean, but to your own self, you feel clean. He says, wash me thoroughly from my iniquities. Then he says, cleanse me from my sin. Now he used the word transgression. That was kind of a smaller thing. Smaller scale. No, but sin is sin. But listen, this was a kind of a smaller scale when he says transgression. He says, just blot that out, make it go away for now, make it easy on me. Then he says, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. This is a little bit bigger, Lord. I need you to get some lights up on me. But then he says, cleanse me from my sin. You know what sin really is, don't you? Sin is an estrangement from God. When you sin, that means that you and God are going separate directions. When you sin, it means that you really don't know who God is in your life. David says, so that we can get hooked back up and get connected, so that we're on the same page again, so I can really be the apple of your eye, man after your own heart. He says, cleanse me from my sin. Here's the last thing I'm going to say. In verse 10, David said, let's cut to the chase of the matter. David says, create in me a clean heart. Create in me a clean heart. The reason why David says to create, that word create means to make anew. To make new. When God creates something, that means it's fresh and it's new. The reason why David says that I need to be made, created a clean heart means that something is wrong with my genetics. We need a new heart because something is wrong with my genetics. If you go back to Psalms 14, when you get home, read it for yourself. David said, I was searching. I was trying to find something within myself, and I was trying to find it through some other people, maybe through generations before me and on down the line. And what David discovered is that everybody's short. Listen, I don't mean to play the dozen, but you short and your mama's short too. So that means my genetics is bad. David said, we messed up somewhere in the garden. We got this thing backwards. God had made us, created us, but we started smelling our own self. You know how we get when we smell our own self. We think we're better than everybody else, and everybody's a sinner except us. But David said, I gotta tell you, I'm a sinner, you a sinner, your mama and your dad is a sinner. There's a problem with the genetics, but not only was there a problem with the genetics, there's a problem with our lifestyle. David was kind of one of those people, when I see something I want it, I go get it. Even if it ain't so good for me. There are some people in this room, anything your eye see, you want it and you'll do anything to get it. That's why the church is mixed up with a whole bunch of people. Church is hodgepodge. If you be honest with yourself, there's some liars in this room. There's some thieves in this room.